Mike Silver of The Athletic joins us to break down the tremendous, cinema-inducing profile from inside the war room of your Jacksonville Jaguars. Hi, friend. It's almost like I just saw you a couple of days ago.
I know. I made it back to the other side of the country, and then I basically went into a cave and continued to type until eventually we had a product.
Well, you did tell me that when you wrote the initial profile Thursday night after the Jaguars' dramatic trade up the draft board for Travis Hunter, that one, it came easily. It was an easy write. I think that, certainly the Jaguars.
I didn't
you told me that.
I didn't say that. It's never easy.
Yes, you said it came easy.
No, I said I wrote it way too fast.
Oh.
But if I said that, then maybe it's because I had a tiny, tiny, tiny beer buzz, but
and maybe a little lack of sleep.
Perhaps.
I don't think easy is how I would at least describe it now. I would say that the Jags made it easy with great access, but that helped. But no, I definitely wrote very quickly Thursday night. My intent was to write something off the first night and get it up on the site. But had they stayed at 5 and say taken Ashton Jonte, then that's a cool story. I would have written it at the end of the night. It would have got up, and I think it would have been a nice thing to have. But because they were the story of the first night of the draft, and I knew how seismic it was once the move was finally announced, that my instinct was do this quickly. Now to try to do it quickly at a high level, I'm not the young man I once was, but caffeine and adrenaline and hopefully, a little bit of finesse got it done.
Lauren noted to us, Mike, that we dropped the ball before you came on. Already, we dropped the ball because what we should have led this interview, this conversation with, was clipping the last time you joined us. That was prior to Trent Baalke being dismissed as general manager. Parting of ways. But Doug Peterson had already been fired, and we needed to clip, what was the line, Lauren?
I don't know how Trent Baalke still has a job.
Yeah, so there's your drop. Here we are, 5 months removed, 4.5, I suppose, from Trent Baalke being dismissed here in Jacksonville. Doug Peterson also out the door. Liam Cohen, James Gladstone, Tony Baselli, the new triumvirate leading the charge here in Duval County. What do you make of this new group now that you've seen it up close and personal?
Well, first of all, it was really cool to watch them work. As James Gladstone says in my story, I've done a lot of talking. It was cool to finally get some action. And, look, you don't go into every draft thinking you're going to get everything you want. It's a fluid situation. But, given, I think people will like this roller coaster ride of this story, given what they were working with. Obviously the trade up was a massive move. They had the 2 threes. They saw a player and then another player they really wanted at 70 come off the board. They pivoted in real time and traded down and then traded back up and got 2 guys at 88 and 89 that if push came to shove, they would have been happy with either at 70. So that was really cool. If you make it to the end of this very long story, you'll find out that, James Gladstone had a little cheat sheet laminated card of 31 guys that were kind of his favored guys. And 8 of the 9 people he ended up taking were on that list. And then they have this whole Jaguars DNA metric, and they scored by their measurement at the top of the league, as, theoretically they should. It's their measurement. But the guys they got were the guys they wanted with Jaguars DNA. So, I thought the process was really good. We won't know if the players are good, as usual, right away. I think it's probably a pretty good bet that Travis Hunter will be. But, I thought the process was really good, and by their standard, it went really well. As to the larger question, the one thing that kind of got cut out of this story from its original form, because it was even longer, which anyone who's read it's going to be like, dude. But it was even longer because I really was trying to tell the story of the reboot, and I did talk about, Liam Cohen dropping out of the search, Shad Khan deciding, hey, I'm going to do a complete reset, and then parting with Trent Baalke, and then, taking you through that. So we lost some of that, but You guys know the story. I guess I would just describe it this way, having talked to a lot of people. Shad Khan wasn't sitting there going, man, Trent Baalke sucks, I got to get rid of him. I think he just understood at some point, like, hey, there's a stigma out there in NFL circles that he's, doesn't always play nicely with others. That stigma is amplified by idiots in the media like Mike Silver. And also, in the building, there are a lot of rumblings that he's not super popular. And Liam Cohen never said to Shad Khan, I don't want to work with Trent Baalke. That's a non-starter. I think his instinct at that point was just, look, I want to make a run at Liam Cohen, and when I do it, I think a full reset is the way to go. He and Tony Baselli had talked many times leading up to this and the years leading up to it about him coming aboard. So it all kind of just aligned. I'm going to go after Liam Cohen. I'm going to get Tony Baselli in this capacity, and then we're going to run a GM search and try to get our guy.
Yeah, I don't know if Liam Cohen had to. Maybe flying back and saying you're going to take an offensive coordinator job over a head coaching job was enough silent words for the organization and Shad Khan. But, Mike, we were just talking earlier in the show about kind of the way that this whole draft went down. And so share a little bit of what was happening on that. You pick at number 2 and you're not picking again until 88. That's a lot of time. For us, Friday felt like a million years waiting for that next pick. But share a little bit of inside the room on that Friday, what exactly the conversations were like.
It was cool because they were in there early, but they knew they were not on the clock for a very long time. They had 2 guys they thought, based on where they thought people would go, that were likely targets at 70. R.J. Harvey, Central Florida running back, and Ashton Gelati, who's a Louisville pass rusher. One big thing in Gelati's favor was that the next guy on their board, the way they stacked it at that position, was way, way, way lower. So it was kind of like, if we don't get Gelati here, we're probably not dealing with that position for a while. Whereas they did really like Tootin and some other running backs. They like the Texas Tech guy, Taj, spaced on his last name right now. But, he was another guy they really liked, and they obviously liked Tootin a ton. And so, it was cool because I saw James Gladstone kind of, listen to Liam Cohen, his coach, and listen to the enthusiasm in his voice about Harvey. And they actually put his combine photo up on one of the screens. So shirtless R.J. Harvey was up there for like 45 minutes. It was weird because I literally said out loud, because I tried to be like a very quiet version of me as given that access, but by then I was talking, and I think when they put it up, I go, man, that looks just like me, and got a couple laughs. But yeah, so we had like shirtless R.J. Harvey up on the board. We had, this whole Gelati thing, and then you had a couple of trade down scenarios that were presenting themselves, and kind of like Lions felt kind of on again, off again, on again. Rams were on and then off. They suspected that Gelati was the target of both teams. I think they confirmed that it was for the Rams. So that when he got picked at 66 and Harvey had just gone at 60, the Rams trade disappeared. But then the Lions reappeared. And so, they were obviously targeting, I think his name is Tesla, this receiver, which, I mean, tell me that guy couldn't have gotten an NIL deal. Probably wouldn't want it now, at least in my neighborhood. But and now he works for the Fords, so that's not going to happen. But Tesla was not a guy that the Jags had targeted. They were now talking about, what to do at 70, and it got kind of dicey, partly because when communicating the trade with the league while on the clock, the league kind of had a little communications issue on their end, and it slowed it down to the point where Brad Holmes, the Giants GM, calls James Gladstone with a minute and a half on the clock, and he's like, "Hey, are we doing this?" And it was neither team's fault, but I don't know if people understand. A minute and a half seems like a decent amount of time to get a pick in, but before you make the pick, whichever GM is going to make it, Gladstone or Holmes, you got to call the guy. And usually, the cliche is, quote, to make sure he's not dead. Now, that's a little dark. But basically, NFL teams, those phone calls aren't just for show and in-house video. Those phone calls continue all the way through. And it's basically like, hey, we've invested months and months in this process, and now we're going to make the pick. Let's make a call and hear his voice and make sure he didn't, go on a bender last night and now he's in the hospital, whatever it is, just like proof of life. So if you are sitting there at a minute and a half and you're Brad Holmes, you're like, I got to get this trade in and then call Tesla, hear him, and then get the pick in. Conversely, if the trade's not going to go through and you're Gladstone, you got to call, probably would have been, I believe it probably would have been Ransaw, the safety they took at 88, as opposed to Milam, the offensive lineman they took at 89. But clearly one of those two guys, based on what I saw on that board, you got to call one of them really quick. The other thing I'd say is that from the Jaguars' perspective, because then they had to turn around when they did pick at 88, they traded back up at 89 while on the clock at 87. So that happened really fast. And the first time Gladstone called Wyatt Milam, he called a different number, maybe his agent, and had to redial. But James Gladstone was putting a landline on speakerphone and painstakingly dialing each number as the clock was ticking. And one of the things I said to James on Sunday is, maybe you need to get a designated dialer, dude. Like, it felt like a lot. Because I think they got the pick in with 20-something seconds to go, and he just laughed. He said, no, I like dialing. So he can do it all at 34. But if anyone wants to apply for that job, by the way, designated dialer, Jaguars War Room, I feel like that's, it's a good part-time job.
Yeah, you better have a slow heartbeat, though, like James does. Taj Brooks is the running back, by the way.
Taj Brooks.
Yep, out of Texas Tech. Who
T-A-H-J,
yes.
Backwards Taj.
Yep, and he was drafted by the Bengals in the 6th round. Mike Silver of The Athletic with us. Mike, at what point did you know the Jaguars were trading up to get Travis Hunter? Because now we've learned that had taken place way back on April 7th.
I learned early Thursday, and people ask me, because I do have this funny reputation, especially among family and friends, but former colleagues, for having news break out in front of me or being in the opportune place at the opportune time. So a lot of people were rolling their eyes, but people did ask me, dude, did you know they were doing it? And no, leading in, I did not know, because I did not know till Thursday morning, but I did have I love the story. I love the whole Jags reboot story. So I wanted to be part of that or capture that in some way. And then secondly, I did have some instincts that they were doing something. They made some comments like, hey, we want to be bold. And there were kind of some knowing smiles. So I don't know if they knew it was Hunter, but I knew that, they were going hunting in their minds, and they weren't going to just be boring. But I would have loved the story and the access had they not done that. But yeah, I didn't mind. That was pretty cool. I was really excited Thursday, and we did start to get some rumblings. I know you, Mia, had heard some things, and then finally it kind of became national. But it was still pretty late, 3 p.m. I started seeing Ian Rappaport and some people kind of talking about it. So you got to give James and Andrew Berry and both organizations, some credit for keeping it secret that long.
Yeah, and ultimately, as we've discussed, Mike, you and I, there still was always this chance of the Browns getting cold feet and leaving the Jaguars at the altar. And I know that's ultimately where I was sad.
And to be clear, they could not actually make this trade, because what the Browns said was, we're not doing it till we're on the clock, because if somehow Cam Ward does not go 1, we're taking Cam Ward at 2, the trade's off. So it was an agreement, and they checked in, I think, the night before, the morning of, to make sure they were still cool. But it couldn't be a binding agreement until that happened. Now, I was trying, of course, to come up with scenarios like, wait, is there a scenario where neither Cam Ward nor Hunter goes 1, where that would, because obviously if Hunter goes 1, the trade's off too. But would either the Titans or someone who traded for that pick end up somehow taking a different player. It seemed unlikely, but let's say somehow the Patriots freaked out and traded up and got Abdul Carter because they just really wanted an edge, then the Browns would have been like, yeah, we're just taking Cam. So, yeah, it was, I thought it was very, very likely to happen, but of course you don't know for sure until they actually put in the card.
Off the text line, who actually has a pretty good question, Mike, that I'm curious if you're able to answer. And because we don't want you burning sources and the access that the Jaguars granted you in the War Room last week, totally understand if you have to deflect on this one.
What would Trent do?
Well,
Krim.
Trent Krim. I thought you meant Trent Baalke. I already did a Trent Baalke impression on today's show, so we're here for that as well if you want to try that. No, this is from one of our favorite Heeligans, our friend DJ Dell. I wonder if the laminated card, the Jags version of the make him a Ram process that Les Snead and the Ram scouting staff with James Gladstone have had each and every year. For example, last year they did a survey and Jared Verse was deemed one of 3 players as a consensus make him a Ram selection. Did you see anything like that from the Jaguars?
Well, it stands to reason that there were similarities, right? That's James Gladstone's mentor. He comes from that place, and he hasn't brought a lot of his own guys in too. So chances are, it might have been some version of that. I did not hear make him a Jag. I heard Jaguars DNA, but every team kind of calls it differently and does it differently. I guess the important part of it to me is that they've decided what they value, and I think that will evolve. But James and Tony and Liam have kind of come up with this. These are the characteristics. This is what we're really looking for. Obviously, talent being part of that, but they have a clarity in their mind about what they want, and they came away from this draft with those type of players in their mind. So I don't do instant draft analysis in terms of like he's a good player, but I do process, and by their standard, they nailed it. So yeah, I don't know. I would imagine there'll be a lot of things that come from the Rams, that James is bringing to them, and that's probably what they talked about in his interview too. So it's not, it's as advertised, but so far so good from their perspective. They feel like they got, players that fit what they're looking for. And I think the other thing that was striking to me was just the alignment. Everybody talks about alignment and it's aspirational. And I know they haven't lost the game yet and, blah, blah, blah. But it was cool to see it. Like there really was a sense with Baselli and Liam and Gladstone that they are pulling together, that they care about one another's opinion, that you'll see in the story. Like Baselli kind of defers on an offensive line decision, which even Gladstone says that's kind of crazy that the number 2 overall pick of the draft, the Hall of Fame left tackle, is sitting there just, smiling as his viewpoint is challenged. But, that wasn't for show. Baselli was like, yeah, we went through our process. I love Milam. Our process says Milam. I just have this draft crush on, the LSU tackle, and we're going to lose him after we pick Milam. And, these draft crushes, they can be heartbreaking with your players.
It does seem like every time that Tony Baselli went to get a snack, one of his draft crushes.
Yeah, he was out of the room twice briefly for Harvey and Jelani being picked. Maybe it wasn't Jelani. I got to go back and look exactly when he was out. But yeah, he, I don't want to make it seem like he was stressed eating. He might not even have been. I mean, I know I was like, dude, they had the teal and black M&Ms in a thing in that room, and I think I consumed about 7,000 of them unconsciously.
We had Sour Patch watermelon in the other room, and I echo that sentiment.
The draft is long.
Real quick, Mike, before Lauren and Taylor and I say goodbye and we pass it off to XL Primetime, which appreciate your time as always. Ethan Waugh, the report is out that he will part ways with the Jaguars as well as the assistant GM will not return. I'm curious, any rumblings or intel or just thought process for you? Is this kind of standard quo, the idea of a new GM comes in, he brings his guys? Do you believe James Gladstone will pull solely from the Los Angeles Rams?
Oh, I don't know if he's going to pull from the Rams, but it is standard that, a new GM would make a bunch of changes, and James made very, very few as new hires go. So yes, after the draft, I would expect there to be more. It's also pretty normal that when someone is in an assistant type position, whether it's a coordinator or in this case, assistant GM, interviews for the big job and then doesn't get it, that person is usually motivated to be like, okay, I'm going to go elsewhere because it's just never going to happen here. They had a shot at me and they didn't love it. Not every time, but that's kind of normal too. I had some good talks with Ethan. He's a really respected personnel guy. I think he probably has something lined up. If not, he'll be sought after. It was notable that he was not in the draft room. The draft room was pretty tight. There weren't that many people in it, usually about a dozen, but normally you'd expect the assistant GM to be one of those people. So the fact that he wasn't kind of, spoke volumes.
Well, Mike, I hope you're in the draft room next year because you did a fabulous job from the War Room, and we really appreciate your extended time with us today.
Well, that would be amazing. And I'll tell you one thing. If Trent Baalke ends up getting a GM job somewhere, I will probably not be in that draft room after Lauren's promo hits the airwaves, and it's going to kill me. But no, listen, I am a Northern Californian. I hate traveling to Jacksonville because it takes a really long time. But once I'm there, it is great to, be around what's going on over at Miller Electric Center and the stadium. So I have a feeling I'll be back soon.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate you. Always a friend of Helmets and Heels, the one and only Mike Silver of The Athletic. Hey, Mia here, and thanks so much for watching 1010XL Jaguars. For even more coverage of the Big Cats, be sure to subscribe to 1010XL Jaguars.